Hello and welcome back to another Ben McGreevy Sports video. I am super pumped today. I am Ben. We have Heath with us. Today we're talking who we think our top 5 goalies in the NHL are going into this season. Now, we brought in Heath because Heath is kind of an expert. We've said this on shows before if you've listened or watched other stuff, but he played goalie his entire life. Heath, how old were you when you started playing goalie?
I think I was 8 or 9, I think. Somewhere in there.
So, and you've taken lessons from guys who have given NHL coaches lessons, right? Or NHL
Oh
goalies
yeah.
lessons.
Yeah. Yeah, goalie coaches for Mike Smith or Dan Ellis and so on and so forth. Dan Ellis, obviously.
Dan Ellis, the legend. If you guys remember Dan Ellis, drop down in the comments your favorite Dan Ellis memory for you Preds fans out there. That's like a name drop that the old fans will get, and anyone who came in after the the Stanley Cup run is like, who on earth is that? As a matter of fact, most people will not know unless you've been around for a really
Yeah.
long time. So that's a nice name drop. I'm sure that if we did a list of top 5 Predators goalies of all time, there aren't many, so he might be on there. That'd be an
Yeah.
interesting one. We'll have to
Yeah.
do that one at some point. Comment once again down below if you want to see us do a top 5 Predators goalies of all time. That would be an interesting one because there have not been many. We've been very blessed in Nashville with good goalies. But here's how we're going to do this today. Heath and I both have a list of 5 goalies. We are going to go through. Heath will start us out here in just a second, and he is going to say who his number 5 is. If his number 5 is like my number 3, we'll just talk about it together and we'll say we'll just skip my number 3 when we get there. I will say this. Heath said that he doesn't, you said you don't have someone in your top 2 that would be expected.
Yeah, I just based off of last season, yeah.
Interesting. And I will say this. There's a very prominent name that I think a lot of people would put up there that is not even in my top 5. And so we're going to be interested. I'm interested to see how this plays out a little bit. I think we both had a really difficult time putting these together.
Yeah. I agree. It was tough.
There are a lot of good goalies in the NHL that are just very similar in skill level. So we'll see where we end up on this. Heath, we're starting with you. Who is your number 5 goaltender heading into the 23-24 NHL season?
I think for me, coming in number 5, the man out of Dallas, Jake Ottinger.
Mm,
I still really like him. Plays the game well. He's big. He can make that critical stop when he needs to, but he battles when he needs to. So he's got good technical skills. He can play the puck when he has to. But he had started out last season, 62 games, 235 GAA, and a 919 save percentage. That's not too bad if you're playing above 55 games in a season. So, but there's a lot of load on him too, every year, for Dallas to have a good solid chance. So he's got to be at his top of his game, and I think he will.
absolutely. Jake Ottinger was number 6 on my list. I went back between my number 5 and Jake Ottinger a lot. And I think that with Jake Ottinger, I just haven't seen enough yet. And that is probably ridiculous. As I was looking at different stats and stuff, he was just below for me, but eye test, I think Jake Ottinger is top 5. I sat right behind him in a game last season. I sat in some different seats than we normally sit in, right behind the goaltender in the Preds attack twice zone. So I got to see Jake Ottinger up close in person, and watching him from right there, I was like, ooh, this guy's good. We actually vlogged that video. I'll link that in the description below if you want to go watch that. I think it was actually the Lexus Lounge video. But it was one of those things where Jake Ottinger's impressive. You said he's big, he moves well, and he
Yeah.
carries a heavy load. I think that is definitely something to think about. I think he's a beast of a goalie. He probably should be in the top 5, but instead I had at number 5 another American. This one is named Connor Hellebuck. To me, Connor Hellebuck has the heaviest workload in the NHL. When you look at the last 3 seasons, he's played more than any other goalie. He faces the most shots of any other goalie in the NHL right now, over the last 3 years. And yet he remains where he has a top 10 save percentage. His over the last 3 years, his goals saved above expected per 60 minutes has been really good. Pretty much always in the top 10 the last 3 years. Here's why he's not higher for me. Because like statistically, Connor Hellebuck should be better. Eye test, he should be better. For me, he hasn't had the playoff success. He always there's severe drop off in the playoffs for Connor
Yeah.
Hellebuck. I will say this: he's playing so much in the regular season. I wonder if that has something to do with his playoffs. So I think that might be a little bit unfair, but that's why I have him slotted at number 5 and not higher. Did you have Connor Hellebuck on your list?
No, he was the one I had what you had, so 5th or 6th.
Okay.
I ended up going with Ottinger, but no, Connor Hellebuck, I mean, he's the thing that you can make the argument here too, he is a proven goaltender. Um, and like you were saying, going into the playoffs, yeah, I think he gets a little bit of that, I mean, he's playing 60 plus games a year. When they make playoffs, he's just honestly just probably beat. Um, and that's not something I think goalies will go out and say straight to you that hey they're just exhausted. They're not going to go say that. But yeah, every year in the playoffs, I don't know if it's just nerves or if it's just how he plays or how much he plays, but
Well,
that's one of those things.
a lot of years the Jets have relied on him to get them to
Yeah,
the playoffs as well, and I think that makes a
yeah,
difference. I really do.
it
And
does.
so to
I mean, you
me, yeah,
you've got a lot on one guy, but yeah, I mean that's a good number 5.
for sure, for sure. So I love that we have Ottinger and Hellebuck kind of like in those sliding points of like 5 and 4, 5 and 6. The question is, who do you have at number 4, and will we start getting anything similar here? Who's your number 4?
So my number 4 is probably going to shock a lot of people. Um, it's Linus Allmark.
Interesting.
Granted, he had a 1.89 goals allowed and a 9.38 save percentage, which is unreal. I mean, that is ridiculous. Um, Last season, it looks like he had 42.4 goals saved above expected. Played 49 games though, so obviously his workload's a little bit lighter. But I think now, granted, the Bruins ran into a very well, not at first, hot Florida Panthers team. And then they decided to flip the switch. But I didn't really like how he played in the playoffs. I mean, he did fine. I don't think he would say it was his best time either. The games he did play, and for me with Boston, how good they were last year, it's hard for me to say he's going to be as good as he was last year again going into this season. I mean, when you have that such of a good hockey team in front of you, it's pretty hard not to. I'm not going to say he couldn't have been very bad, but I mean, he did really well in the circumstances, but he had a very good team in front of him.
So I was teasing that there was a guy who was left off my list, and it was Allmark.
Yeah.
And the reason is because outside of last season, he has
Mhm.
been just a mediocre goaltender.
Yeah.
Now, can guys flip a switch and come alive? Yes, they can. And so he might be that guy going into this season. I think that you're right. It's interesting how you feel like you had to put him in your top 5 because he just won the Vezina and his stats were unreal last year. But I am
Yeah.
nervous that the Boston Bruins stats maybe twisted his a little bit. Like I said, he's not in my top 5. Here's how I did a little bit of this as well, and I'll get into this a little bit more with my number 4. If you said to me, you have to choose 5 goalies that you're going to put on your team to win a Stanley Cup for you, would Allmark be on that list? The answer is I don't think so. And that is why I couldn't put him in my top 5. And I'm sure Bruins fans are going to be in the comments like, you don't know anything. You're not from Boston. You're from the South. all these ridiculous things that Bruins fans say in these Bill Burr voices all the time. But to sit there and I just don't process him as a beast of a goalie. And the fact that they were calling for him to get pulled in
Yeah.
the playoffs maybe says
Yeah.
he isn't as good as the regular season statistics showed. I think he was a beast and he played well, but it was historic. I just don't know
Yeah.
if it was like as legitimate as we want it to be.
Yeah. I agree with that. I mean, I'm looking at his stats here. He hasn't played more than 49 games in a season. Last year was the most games he played.
Yeah.
And obviously he was with Buffalo, but prior to that, and Buffalo has not been good for a very long time.
Yep.
With the loss of Ryan Miller, another goalie. Yeah, I mean, coming off Vesna and the season he had, I'm hoping he can recreate that. I
Yeah.
don't think it'll be that. I don't think anybody thinks it'll be at that level.
No.
I think we'll get back to reality for him. But at the same time, yeah, this could have just been one of those one-off seasons.
And he can prove me wrong this year, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm very okay with that. My number 4 is a little fellow named, and when I say little, he's definitely not little, a guy named Andre Vasilevsky. He's at number 4. Do you have him in your top 5?
Actually, no.
Okay, sounds good. So we both left off notable names. Mine was all Mark, yours was Vasilevsky. So I think we're gonna have a similar top 3, by the way, because there are 3 guys who are like pretty significantly like leading the pack in goaltenders. These last 2 we talked about, it would be a tough decision. Vasilevsky is a guy who is more of a heart pick for me than a statistics pick. Although when you watch him play, his left to right movement mixed with his size is next level otherworldly good. It is incredible. I adore watching Vasi play. But for me, this was literally a name a top 5 goaltender in the NHL, like my scenario earlier that you would want to take you to a Stanley Cup final. Vasi's on that list for me. He's still top 10 in every single stat in the last 3 years. But when it comes to the biggest moments, he generally is going to get it done. And so that is something that I think is interesting about Vasilevsky. Here's the thing is that if you put the 3 guys that have ahead of him on Tampa the last 3 years, I don't know, or the last 4 years, I don't know that Tampa's result is any different because I think the 3 guys ahead of him are that good. But for me, Vasi is just like a top 5 goaltender in the league. I feel like if you don't include him, which I know you didn't, but it's almost like have we watched this guy be as good as he is? But I also think that he's starting to decline a little bit from where he maybe was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, when he was just like at his ultimate peak.
Yeah.
But Vasi's a beast. He had to fall into my top 5. So that is why he is at my number 4 slot.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have anything to add on
I
Vasi?
mean, no, not really. I mean, yeah, like we were saying, these 4 and 5s, they can slide anywhere in here. Um, I think the biggest question mark if you're wanting to ask who's the biggest question mark in here, it would be Allmark. Um, but no, with Vasilevsky, that was a tough one for me. Just like you were saying, the last 3 to 4 years, I mean, he has been just at the top of his game. Playing, I mean, he battles so hard. He can make that one stop you have to have in a game to win game 7 in overtime.
But he's
So
also had a few rough games
he
recently.
has. And that's kind of where I said, well, maybe going into the season, we'll see what happens. Tampa's team has changed
Yeah.
a little bit over the last couple of years to a point where I think for me, going into this season, he does fall in the top 5. Not he's in me. If you had to tell me, he'd probably be number 6 for me
Okay.
if there was a 6.
Yeah.
But he's still really good, and hopefully he gets back to where he was, a couple of years ago.
I think he definitely can. I'll be interested if you had this conversation last year. I think he would have been top 3 for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh
but
yeah.
last season I think hurt him a little bit in this category. All right, let's move on. Who is your number 3 goaltender?
Going at number 3, the actual smaller guy, UC Saros.
Okay, interesting.
64 games, 269 GAA, and a 919 save percentage. obviously we know how he plays. Small guy, but he has to play top of his crease. He's got to battle. He's got to be quick. His his technical skill of the game, and it's going to sound weird, but the way he can skate, which sounds weird for goalies, right? But skating is a big deal for goaltenders, and it's not your average. I mean, you're not player skating, but how can he move that left to right, forward and back, and how quickly he can do it. He's one of the best, especially with his size. Um, and he finds a way to limit space when other goalies don't have to limit it because they're already covering it. So he takes off the angle every time so a shooter's coming down the wing, but he knows how to play and read the play as well as he does to make that save and know where that puck's going, or if it's going to be a pass where he's going next. So that's why I slot him at number 3. I think he's very good. Vezina Trophy is probably in his future, hopefully. Um, but some
Hopefully.
days, I think the biggest thing for me with Staros is he has a lot of times, and you'll probably say this or agree with this. He has a slow start to the season a lot.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
that's my only concern with him. He's typically always having a slow start, or he has a slump somewhere that's substantially a few games.
Yeah. So Saros is my number 2. So I have him slotted in second. And I imagine that the two guys you had to have ahead of him are my number 1 and my number 3. For Saros, it's his workload. Over the last 3 seasons, his save percentage is the 4th best over the last 3 years on a, let's be fair, pretty atrocious Nashville Predators team
Yeah,
that with a pretty bad defensive. Like,
yeah,
genuinely, when I look at the 2 teams or the 2 players that I have around Saros, they have way better defenses outside of Roman Yossi than Nashville. Like I sit there and I look at Saros, what he's been able to do on the Nashville Predators specifically. His goals saved above expected per 60 is top 2 in the NHL. Like, and it has been, right? Like this isn't like a 1-year thing. If we were to keep going back, like 2 years ago, it was high. 3 years ago, it was high. Like what you're looking at with UC Saros is that man just is a beast in the crease, and he makes saves that he shouldn't make. I
mhm.
think that he's easy top 3. You have him slotted at number 3. I have him slotted at number 2. I think that if you put him on a good team, uh, it is insane what he would be able to do on a team. I mean, throw him on Tampa the last couple years, proved like they're still winning the Stanley Cup probably a little bit easier. Like throw him on some of these teams that have had some goalie trouble but have had good rosters, and they're having no issues on winning. Saros is that good. You talked about all the technical stuff. That's why he slots in at number 2 for me. His movement puts me in shock every single night, which is pretty impressive. Who's your number 2?
Uh,
If well,
my
actually,
num-
well, hold on. Before you get to your number
hmm,
2, because I guess I haven't even given my number 3. Uh, my number 3 might be your number 2,
yeah,
and if it is, like we'll talk about them together. My number 3 is Igor Shesterkin.
yeah.
Is that your number 2?
That's my number. Yeah,
All
that's
right,
my number
sweet. So
2.
we flipped these guys. So for me, Shesterkin is just so good all the way around. He had a little bit of a down year this year,
Mhm.
but it doesn't take away that his down year is still really good. Like that is when you look at his down year this year, he was still in the top 10 in goals saved above expected per 60, like among starters. That's ridiculous that he had a
Yeah,
pretty bad year. He was in the top 10
right.
in making these saves. Like that's insane to me. He shows up in the big moments. His playoff stats are better than his regular season stats. And I think
Yeah,
that when you look at that body of work, it says, hey, when Shesterkin needs to show up, Shesterkin shows up. And good old Igor, which is always what I type because it's way easier than typing Shesterkin. Um, Igor comes through. And I think that to me is why Igor is a top 3 goaltender in the NHL. I have him at 3 just behind Saros, just because the consistency of Saros
mhm,
every year has been proven. But Shesterkin, I mean, these guys are almost interchangeable. What are your thoughts on Igor Shesterkin?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed everything there. Shesterkin, for me, the reason why I slotted him above Staros was I think, like you're saying, these can go either way. I mean, I could have put Staros at 2 if I felt like it. I think going into the season, though, Igor has a bounce back season. I think last year they just didn't. The entire Rangers team and overall just didn't seem the same, right? As
I
we'd
agree.
seen the year before, which led to them obviously making a coaching change and all this other stuff. But anyway, no, Shesterkin, he's a great goalie. He's very technically sound. He can make that save when he needs to. He gives me. I'm not going to compare him straight up to him because Rangers fans may like absolutely hate me for this. Um, he gives me a little bit Henrik Lundqvist vibes, the way he plays.
Yeah,
He does not have that almost traditional style butterfly goalie play. He
yep,
plays a little bit almost like he's a little bit rigid, which works out well for him. But no, he's big. He knows what he needs to do, and he's consistent as for the most part outside of last season, which is why I slotted him just above Saros. I think he can do. I think he'll do a little bit better this year than Saros. But I mean, when we're saying that a down year for him and him being still in the top 10 and almost everything,
yeah,
I mean they're just this could go any which way you wanted it to. So for
absolutely.
him, I like him at number 2 for me. But
Yep. That's a great point. That's a great point. All right. So we have only one goalie remaining.
bet it's
And
this thing.
I I am imagining it's the same guy.
I would think so.
If it
I would
is
hope so. If it's not, then
if
I
you
don't
didn't
know.
put Freddie Anderson as your number one goalie, then I'm gonna be shocked. Just kidding, just kidding. Who's your number one?
Freddie, no, I'm kidding.
What?
No, no, no. Um, um, my number one is Ilya Sorokin.
The only correct answer.
I
Yes.
mean, this guy works his tail
Yep.
off. With a 233 goals of GAA and a 924 save percentage in 62 games last season on a not good New York Islanders team.
Yeah.
I mean, he works his tail off night in, night out. I mean, this is the same deal with UC Saros too. Without either of these goalies, neither team would even be talked about
Yep.
in the playoff bubble, right?
Yep. That's why they're
Um,
my top two, by the way.
I mean, yeah, yeah, I get that, um, and maybe I should have slotted Saros there, but who knows? Who cares? But I mean, Ilya Sorokin for me, I mean, he is the way he plays, and he's consistently operating at that elite level every single game, no matter how many shots he faces in one night. The next night he comes back reset, ready to go. I mean, that just shows what a great goaltender he is. Um, and goalies are weird. We all know that. I'm weird. I like to be alone if I have to play hockey. I don't like to talk to people. Um, and for him, it just shows his mentality. When he's at the rink and he's got to do his job, he's doing it no matter what happened the night before. And
Yep.
that's tough, especially when you're playing 60 plus games in an NHL season.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah, I agree. To me, his goal saved above expected per 60 is just so good. And it has
yeah,
been. And he makes those saves that he shouldn't night in, night out, like you were talking about. You look at his save percentage over the last 3 seasons combined among starting goalies, and he's second in the league. Um, and to me, that is so impressive. And by the way, the number one person on that is Allmark, which is funny because the last 2 years he's had, and I didn't include him, but I still think that when you look at the team in front of them,
mhm,
Sorokin is just better. I think that something that's so impressive about Sorokin is he gets in a bad spot and somehow still makes the save.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
he can get out of
I
position, but will
mean,
make the save. He stays in position and makes the save. He's going to make the save. And when you have that reliability, and
yeah,
by the way, let me say this: the fact that he is playing for the New York Islanders means that he is not getting the media attention
Mhm.
that he probably deserves, and the media talks about him a lot. But if you put him on the Rangers, if you put him on Toronto or Montreal or any of the Canadian markets outside of Winnipeg, like this, like Sorokin is winning the Vezina every year, every year, and I think that stands out as to why he is number one, the number one goalie in the NHL, and the fact that you and I both untalked about beforehand
Mhm.
slotted him at number one, and there was not really a lot of discussion in my mind about it. Like, it was pretty
Yeah,
clear
no.
once I started doing a little bit of research, like, Sorokin's number one, and you can't really
Yeah,
question it.
yeah. I mean, that was the same way. I mean, as soon as I looked at a few stats, it's like, well, this is number 1 was pretty easy.
Yep, yep,
The
and
rest,
then yeah,
they shake up as however you feel like. Well, at least the 2 and 3.
yep,
Um, but yeah, I mean, Sorokin is just I like you're saying. I mean, with the team in front of him, I don't think he gets enough credit.
I agree.
And same with Saros, right? I
Yep,
think Saros gets talked about a lot. Um, but those 2 goalies, they don't get enough credit in terms of, I mean, like we're saying, without these 2 guys on those teams, they're not gonna. I mean, we're talking like draft lottery probably every year.
ye genuinely bottom 5, like,
Yeah.
they're
Oh
bad,
yeah.
they're
Yeah.
bad. Sweet. Well, if I will say this, if you are watching this video right now and you say, You idiots, you forgot about this goalie and you didn't even mention their name and they're the best. We mentioned Freddie Anderson. Maybe you think he's the best. I want you to drop their name in the comments below and just say who you think is the best goalie in the National Hockey League. Or if you think that we got them out of order at all, I want to hear your thoughts. So leave a comment below. Thank you again for watching or listening or whatever you were doing this on. We always appreciate you, Heath. You're always a joy to have on this channel and on
Thanks
this
for having me.
show, and everything, that we get to enjoy together. And if you don't mind liking the video and subscribing to the channel, that would mean so much. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next video.